So actually, I'm a computational linguist. Some people think that means I build big machine learning models, and I do work on big machine learning models, but what it really means is that I'm fascinated with how conversation works. And in particular, I want to understand how it is that students can learn together through discussion and then build technology that can support effective learning experiences for students where they're engaging in learning through discussion collaboratively. And in a MOOC context, what that means is that I'd like to be able to work towards a future where being a student in a MOOC is not such a solitary activity, but that it can incorporate more of the kinds of collaborative and project-based learning experiences that I've studied in my research in computer-supported collaborative learning in classrooms and have found to be effective. And it is very true that in MOOCs as they stand now that the discussion forums are underused. But I don't think anyone believes that discussion forums as they exist in current MOOCs are particularly the pinnacle of design in discussion opportunities, and usually course instructors have not spent a lot of time thinking about how to integrate those opportunities into the instruction. So I'm happy that Beth Porter, actually from edX, is here. My research group back at Carnegie Mellon has been actively partnering with edX to try to build this better future of a more social MOOC, and hopefully those opportunities will be forthcoming going forward, and I'll talk a little bit about that in this talk today. But I want to talk a little bit more about how we do our analytics on discussion. And it really is very much in the same flavor that Ken was talking about this morning, and bringing together, whoa, what happened?
I'll look into it.
In bringing together theories and data and instruction in order to build a self-improving kind of a cycle. And so we start with the foundation of knowing that there are, in the field of social psychology in particular, a lot of wisdom about that has been learned through generations of empirical work on how relationships work, how interactions work, in describing the basic processes that are underlying all of those interactions. And layered on top of that, the field of sociolinguistics has studied those same processes, but from the standpoint of trying to understand how those processes are reflected through the choices that people make in how to express themselves in certain situations. And unfortunately, in lots of data mining research, these foundational layers that would help us to really understand what it is in language that we should be trying to capture in our models, it just gets ignored. And so what we've been trying to do in the research in my group is to really bring these fields together, to understand more and listen more to what has been learned already in research in psychology and sociolinguistics, and build them into our discourse analytic models. So some of the work that we have done has been on developing analysis schemes, multidimensional, that can represent how it is that these different processes, some cognitive and some social, are interwoven in interaction. And at the heart of what we really want to get to in these conversations in order to make them valuable for learning is to engage students in those kinds of interactions that trigger the important cognitive processes for their learning. But what we recognize is that as soon as you put a student in a social setting, there are other kinds of things going on that can sometimes suppress the kinds of interactions that we want to see. But if we can build an effective social environment, we can get students to offer each other important scaffolding. We can increase the extent to which students are engaging in these processes. And we also recognize the important connection between the social and the cognitive, and understand how then looking at one can help us to know a little bit more about what's happening at another dimension. So I just want to share one exciting result from our recent research, which feeds back into a partnership that we have with Jackie Moen is also here today, an important collaborator at the Smithsonian. We are working together to build more team experiences into their Superheroes MOOC. In preparation for that, we've been studying how in an online setting, we can do a better job of trying to assign students to teams and support them in getting sort of a running start on their team work before they get into their teams. Because one thing that we had seen from studying Some existing team-based MOOCs is that students lose their connection with other resources, other help resources outside of the MOOC when they get into their team. Sometimes they get into their team and find out they thought they wanted to work with these people, but they actually just don't work that well together. So how can we overcome that? So we've developed this paradigm where we divide the teamwork into two components, a part of the project that students actually do in sort of a whole community setting, that where they do something individually, they contribute it to the discussion forum, and they offer each other feedback. And from that, we're able to take constructs that we have learned to recognize through our discourse analytic models to look at the discussion that's happening in that sort of whole community context and identify pairs of students who appear to work well together on the topic that's related to the project that they're going to have later. And so then we can run an optimization algorithm over what we detect from those conversations to be able to assign students into teams where we maximize those pairwise working together relationships. And again, it's in drawing from these same kinds of constructs that have been part of our research in understanding better how collaborative learning works in a smaller sort of classroom setting. Well, we have recently run a validation study in Mechanical Turk, so sort of simulating a MOOC context, where we contrasted batches of students where they would do the two part process, but we would randomly assign them to teams, versus they would do the two-part process, but based on how they had interacted in the first part, we would assign them to these teams. And what we found when we looked at the quality of the projects that they completed together, that the teams where we looked at how they were interacting in the discussion forum, their projects were 3 standard deviations better. We were actually totally shocked. We weren't so shocked that they were significantly better, but the fact that it was that big was astounding to us. So we're looking forward to applying this paradigm now in the Superheroes MOOC, so that will be forthcoming work. I just want to sort of point to the fact that we have done research on a number of different kinds of process and state measures that relate to how people interact through conversation. I'm happy to discuss this further with people, also looking at how these processes connect with outcomes. But more importantly, I want to point especially to this partnership with edX. So if you want to find out more about it, you can go to our website, dance.cs.cmu.edu. There are resources there. You can join us, and we look forward to a MOOC of the future that has more of these kinds of experiences built in.